In this video, we're going to explore 5 reasons why rich people complain. And the first one is that most rich people have been lied to at some level. I remember when I was young and looked at all the different media messages coming from my culture, and I would say that the culture boils down to a promise that is the American dream that says you're going to work hard, you're going to work smart, you're going to be rich, and then you're going to be happy. And so throughout my 20s and 30s, I worked hard, I paid off all debt, I developed savings cushions, I developed more savings cushion, I bought the things that I wanted to have. I took more and more time off because that's one of the things that being wealthy allows you to do is you don't have to work a 9 to 5. And I discovered I was not happy. In fact, what I discovered was that in the spaciousness, the lack of adrenaline, the lack of pressure to pay the bills and get moving, what it did was it allowed me to think deeper. It allowed me to reconnect with myself. And right on the surface of what I was reconnecting were buried childhood memories, were periods of extreme loneliness, of trauma, of being misunderstood, of being afraid of being hit. And so when you're in the thrust of growing and becoming all that you can be and having to pay the bills, you can't remember what it was like to be 6 years old or feel this or wonder what you're going to do with your life, etc. You've got to survive. You've got to grow. There's no time for that. And so strangely, at the very point where I had the most freedom, lots of time to do whatever I wanted to do, lots of money, and really one of the things that's very true for us as a materialistic culture is, once you have a house, having 3 houses is just a headache. It can sound romantic, but you've got to manage someone to clean that house, or now you become a house cleaner of 3 houses. It's a headache. It's not, it's nicer to stay at a hotel, perhaps. And staying at a hotel can be a headache, because what if the people next door to you want to watch late night horror movies, or the barge in the bay below is blasting out a disco which isn't your music. So the bottom line is that the cultural promise that being rich will make you happy is a lie. And you don't discover that lie until you're rich. And rich is, of course, completely relative. There's plenty of billionaires who don't feel rich because they're not the richest. There's plenty of millionaires who don't feel as rich as their multimillionaires. And it goes on down the line. But whatever it is that you consider being rich, when you arrive there, happiness is not guaranteed. It may, in fact, be inverted, meaning you may find that some of the most stressful times in your life is having arrived and then figuring out what you have to do. What do you do next? Because the culture says, get rich. It doesn't say what to do when you are rich. It says, be free, but it doesn't say what to do with the freedom. Now, in the addictive mentality of much of our culture's wealthy, there is a sense of just get richer. So I'm rich, but I need to get richer. And then you can go back to the adrenaline pump and try and become bigger and work longer hours and this and that and the other. But that doesn't often make people happy. Sonia Lyubomirsky, in her work on exploring happiness and what actually makes people happy, discovered that going from a comfortable living to an exorbitant living maybe adds 10% of the total happiness quotient, that 50% has to do with your biological set point, that 40% has to do with your daily habits, etc., and your relationships, and that 10% is, you've got a comfortable car, you've got a safe place to stay, you've got some medical insurance, you can buy the food you need to eat, etc. And if you go from that comfortable level and you're moving towards you can save 10% for retirement, which in the U.S. is somewhere between, it's usually $50,000 and $75,000 a year for an individual, can meet those basic needs of survival and security in Maslow's hierarchy. And of course, being rich has very little to do with love and belonging, which is the third hierarchy in human needs. When I travel around the world, for example, I find that many of the closest knit families, where you have strong senses of love and belonging, are amongst demographics of people who make 1/10 of the income in my town, Marin County, California. And so they've got higher levels of love and belonging at 1/10 to 1/100th of the income. So having money doesn't ensure love and belonging, which is it's the biggest source of happiness, is love and belonging founded or built on the foundation of survival and security about survival. And so there's a bit of a lie there. And often people who've gotten rich, some feel guilty because they never made it, they inherited it, and they just feel uncomfortable. Why did I get in this position? Others make money mean something, like rich people are smart, and you get rich and you're just as dumb as you were before. And so you've got cognitive dissonance. All the meanings that people make around what it means to be rich. Does being rich mean you're powerful? Well, sometimes people who are rich feel powerless because they are aware that it could be stolen, it could be taken away, and that they're a target. So, in short, the first reason that rich people complain is that they've been told a cultural narrative that the majority of the time turns out to be incorrect. That what they thought when they were 10 or 20 or whatever was going to be the be-all and end-all. I'll have arrived when I have this amount of money in this situation. They arrive there and they don't feel any different than when they were there than when they were surviving, 10, 20, 30 years earlier. They may feel worse. They may be older. They may be fatter. Those will make you generally feel worse if you've got, more pains in your body and stuff like that. And so there's this sense of, wait a minute. Everyone thinks I'm happy. I don't feel particularly happy. I thought I would be happy. I've been lied to. So reason number one. Reason number two is we like to have a sense of love and belonging, which partly bases itself on understanding. We want to understand and be understood. Well, who understands rich people? Other rich people. When you own a company and you've got tons of headaches, for me owning a company, it's like, oh gosh, now there's car trouble for this employee. Now he's had an affair and, he's having a fight with his wife. Now, now what? You're taking off in the middle of the job because of this. And so as a company owner, there's all the hassles of recruiting, training, managing employees, and being in integrity. Because I go out to my clients and I say, we're going to do this by this time for this amount of money. Now that's all, well and good to say, but then I've got to figure out how to make all these things happen. And there's literally thousands of people that have to cooperate or I become a liar. And I don't want to be a liar. So I'm really invested in having all these things happen so that what I said would happen would happen. And every single little problem, the coronavirus is happening right now. So, and then, my business isn't affected in many ways, but it's still shut down. So this and that. So there's so many things going on. Now, the employee does not relate to any of this. what they relate to is a critical boss, And so if I, go out and socialize with a bunch of employees and start talking about, the headaches of their cars and the this and this and this, then they're all going to get pissed at me because that's not their reality at all. And so I find I'm not really welcome if I tell the truth there. So what do? I hang out with other business owners. And of course, they completely understand. And what do the employees do? They hang out with other employees and, those horrible bosses. And they completely understand. Because it's looking at the same reality from two perspectives. The boss is always wanting more. There's this and that, and so, so rich people complaining about the problems of being rich do not get any sympathy with poor people. They have no interest in that. And part of the reason is the poor people have been told a lie that once they get rich, if they do, they'll be happy too. So they imagine that the rich people are really happy. And so they should be grateful for being really happy. But they're not happy, so they're not necessarily grateful. But the poor people don't know that because they've never been rich. So that's, a misunderstanding. And then the rich feel misunderstood because they're expected to feel ways that they don't actually feel, that doesn't measure up. And so hanging around rich people, the problem with this, and it was pointed out in Malcolm Gladwell's book, on getting to know strangers, I forget the title, but he pointed out that people at Harvard and MIT in the sciences who were at the bottom of their class in Harvard and MIT were still in the top 1% of 1% in the world. So if you're at the bottom of your class in Harvard, you're going to feel like a shit. That's what the studies say you'll actually feel like. You're going to feel like you're at the bottom, you're not good enough, you're worthless. But statistically speaking, being at the bottom of your class in Harvard is being at the top of your class in almost any other university. But because we measure competency and value using a social ranking system rather than mathematical statistics, meaning how you feel about yourself will be how well you're performing in your group. It will not be a statistical-based feeling. So if you're at the bottom of your group in Harvard, you're going to feel like a shit, just like if you're at the bottom of your group in a ghetto high school in the Bronx, just like if you're in the bottom of your group in a Peruvian university that has very little competency in sciences. And I'm just throwing around because I don't actually know where the statistics are. But there's going to be universities and places in the world that, with where the teachers have very little training, they can't afford textbooks, etc. And you could be at your top of those groups and you'd feel good about yourself. But if you then jump to the bottom of Harvard, you feel terrible about yourself, even though it means you're way smarter than 99.9% of the population in your field. So this is the problem with rich people hanging around rich people. They're part of the 1% or the 1% of the 1%. But they're not at the top of their peer group. So you've got 10 million, and you're having dinner with someone who has 20 million, and you're having dinner with someone who has 30 million, and you're having dinner with someone, well, they're not even there. They're at the other table where they have 100, So you're at the bottom of your rank, the group that you're associating with. And they're not happy, by the way. The person with the 20 million, they're salivating because over at the next table they just heard that someone made $1 billion that year. They've only got 20 million, and the other person made $1 billion. Oh, it's so unfair, right? And so we develop a sense of scale based on what's around us. And because rich people often hang out with rich people, they're invariably, everyone but the richest person in the world is lower ranking on financial metrics than everyone else. So even if you may be Bill Gates, who's annoyed that Bezos has gotten ahead of you. What can you possibly do with another 20 billion? It doesn't matter. It's what you're comparing yourself to. So hanging around other rich people makes rich people feel poor for the most part. And so they may complain and actually not feel that they're rich. Now, the other thing is resensitization. And here's what I mean. If I haven't if I haven't had a meal for 3 days, I am famished. And when I come across a dumpster, I see what? A whole half sandwich? Someone ate a sandwich and right at the center point they just threw away and it's fresh? I mean, I am over this world. Because this is unheard of, statistically speaking, a fresh half sandwich. Meaning it was thrown in within the last few hours, and it's not all muddied. This is a gold mine. And so I delicately get the sandwich out and I eat it, and it's the best sandwich I've ever tasted because I'm 3 days hungry, and it's just amazing. Now, I go down the road and someone offers me a whole sandwich and I'm already full and it doesn't taste quite as good as the next one. And then I start eating sandwiches and then this thing called hedonic adaptation kicks in, where you start tuning out everything that's familiar and taking it for granted. You meet your wife for the first time, and she's the most beautiful person, this and kind and this, and it's so amazing. And maybe will I be good enough for her? And will I do this and this, that, the other? And then, you live together, and it's like, whatever. You don't even notice. You didn't notice what she was wearing because you were busy with other things. What happens is that whatever is familiar, the brain tunes down. And whatever is unfamiliar, it elevates. So even though your wife may be a much better person than some skanky model who walks by on a runway or whatever, it's unfamiliar. So your brain elevates the unfamiliar and de-elevates the familiar. It exaggerates the new. Now, one of the reasons the brain does this is the brain has a bias towards the negative. It has a bias towards fear. And the way to understand this is imagine that you're in paradise for a moment. You're in paradise, the weather's just right, and you're in this beautiful natural waterfall, and it's just beautiful. And whatever it is that you imagine is heaven, tropical flowers, sunlight, it's just absolutely, 360 degrees paradise. And you're naked in the water, it feels so refreshing, and you see a snake. Now, what happens to your brain when you see a snake? Now, the snake occupies less than 1% of the visual territory. If you look all around, snake is this long, swimming in the water, right? Wriggling along the top towards you. It's 1% of 1% of the whole landscape. It's nothing. But it's got this one big thing about it. This tiny little thing could kill you. Why? Because it's unknown. You don't know if this snake is poisonous or not. You only know that some snakes could kill you. Now, you don't know if this snake is going to kill you. So it may not be a poisonous snake. It may be poisonous, but not poisonous enough to do any harm. It may bite you, or it may not. Now, the odds are it's not, if you look at the statistical data, here's this tiny little thing in this whole stream, right? It can go a lot of places. So statistically, it's not going to swim out of its way and bite you. That you've got that in your favor. Now, the next statistic is statistically, it's not a fatal snake. If you take the entire snake population on the planet and have all of them bit you, there's probably only like 10% of snakes that would kill you. And the third statistic is it's this tiny, tiny thing in the entire landscape. But what does your brain do in that image? It is riveted. Vanished are the tropical flowers, the harp players, the whatever it is, the beautiful trees, the moonlight, the rippling water. Vanished. Everything vanishes, and all attention is on 1% of 1% on reality. That might, under certain circumstances, from time to time, kill you. That's how your brain works. Now, if you understand how much bias there is to the negative in that scenario, that this tiny little snake eclipses the entirety of paradise, now you understand the problem of rich people. Because no matter how many houses, no matter how many 5-star dinners, there's still that 1% of 1% that could kill them. Now they're rich, they could be robbed, they could be mugged, their car could be stolen, it could be shot at. Why? Because other people have been told the same lie, that being rich makes you happy. And so they haven't never been rich, and if they imagine if they steal this Mercedes or whatever, this Bentley, they'll be happy then. Well, they'll discover if they do that they're not. They're now paranoid of being caught and put in prison and don't trust their fellow criminals and all that. But they haven't discovered that. And so the reality is that there's always something wrong. There's always something wrong. And the brain always elevates what's wrong ahead of what's right. And there may be more wrong in a rich person's life than there is in a poor person's life. Now, what do I mean? If you run 10 companies, then you've got an IRS audit happening there. Well, your brain immediately imagines the worst. What if one of my employees embezzled? What if the IRS finds it? What if I'm headline news in the papers? And suddenly you've got a terrible catastrophe there, and there's your snake in paradise. That's just one company. Meanwhile, the top CEO was recruited by your competitor, and so what if your profits collapse, and where are you going to find a CEO in this market? And oh my goodness, another snake in the paradise. And so now your life is devastated by this thing. And over in this third company, it turns out that one of your top salesmen has been trying to seduce your wife into an affair. And because you're busy running these 10 companies, you're not giving enough attention to your family. And meanwhile, this smooth salesperson who is, they're a very good salesperson, they're, charismatic and handsome and this and that. Well, they're putting all that attention on your wife. For who knows what reason, but whatever it is. So, but you don't have the time to go do this because you're busy trying to deal with the IRS audit. So what if I lose this and this and this? And what if people find out? And so you've got tons and tons and tons of stuff to be upset about. And the other bias that makes this particularly upsetting for rich people is the fact that it works like this. How would you like to have $1? Take it or leave it, it's just $1, right? Okay, that's the brain's reaction to something you don't yet have. I don't have $1. I don't really need $1. If I never get the $1, it's not a big deal. But this is an interesting little brain trick. So I give you the $1. I give you the $1. Here's $1. You say, okay, fine, thanks. Why not? You have $1. Now, someone steals the $1 out of your pocket, or someone demands that you give them $1. No, it's my $1. It's my $1. Someone stole my $1. As soon as it becomes a part of our identity, we feel like what's really at risk is our identity. See, if someone stole my dollar. They're not just taking the dollar, they're taking my intelligence, because if I was intelligent, I wouldn't have been pickpocketed. Only stupid people are pickpocketed. I was pickpocketed. I'm stupid. They didn't just steal my dollar, they stole my intelligence. And so the fear of loss is around 5 to 10 times higher than the problem with not having anything in the first place. Well, the more you have, the more you have to lose. And so, many times rich people do not enjoy their properties and things at all. What they do is they wander the property and look, oh, that security camera isn't working, that person's a bit furtive, looked like so-and-so was eyeing, my wife, the security camera caught someone. They're in the fear of loss, which is no fun. It's not happy. It's miserable. You're attached and you have no power. Well, you can say you can have power, but even with, hiring the mafia to protect and shoot everything down, well, you can read the biographies of the mafia. How many of the people who hired, top security, whatever, like Harvey Weinstein, he hired the Mossad, the top Israeli security companies, to protect what? His reputation. Well, if you don't have a reputation, you don't have to protect the reputation. If you don't have money, you don't have to protect the money. You make all this money and then the government takes half of it. And you feel poor. I've been robbed. And so the fact that the brain is far more upset about losing something than it is about never having it. You could say, so-and-so is dating Jennifer Aniston, whoever is your male or female model, right? The one that, well, so what? Big deal. Why? Because you've never dated your idol, whoever that is. You've never dated your idol, so who cares if someone else is, right? It's no big deal. But let's say for some weird reason that next week I introduce you to your idol, you date them, and you think maybe you've got something, right? This felt good, they liked it, you liked it, but then you see that they dated someone else. What do you mean? What do you mean? Now you're absolutely furious. Now, what's interesting is that if I don't introduce you to them, you won't lose them. Common sense, right? Now, what if I said that you can only do this for a week? You can only date them for a week. You might still feel more heartbroken knowing going into it than if I never introduced you to begin with. So this is the problem with, and so let's tie this into another thing. Many rich people who, have their highest earning powers and, let's say they make a good salary and so they have a good lifestyle. Well, then they enjoy that good lifestyle in their, 30s, 40s, and 50s. But then the new salesman has come along, a better insurance salesman or this or that comes along, and they lose and it goes down. So you have a number of different brain things coming together that make it easier to feel upset and paranoid and small than if you didn't have something. And this hedonic adaptation portion of this equation is really important to understand. I was noticing it today. So here's the scenario. I'm in my dream house, right? With a dream job. I'm just going to work 4 hours today, doing something I really enjoy. And it's not peak or anything, but I make $175 an hour as a consultant, and I enjoy it. And it's outdoors. It's doing landscape design, and it's fun. I mean, being paid to be outdoors with nice people and tell them how to make their landscapes beautiful. It doesn't get better than that. Would I rather $250 an hour and sit in a cubicle to be paid to argue with someone like an attorney? No, hell no. So and what you discover, at least what I discovered, is there's only so much that money can buy that's actually brings a substantial amount of well-being. But one of them is great food, and so I've got the finest pearls of organic jasmine tea anywhere that I know in the world, right? And they're delivered to me to my door. Doesn't get better than that. And then I've got these frozen organic peaches. Now, I like jasmine tea with frozen organic peaches. Why? Well, the peaches give a little bit of sweetness and a peach essence into the tea, number one. Number two, they because they're frozen, they rapidly cool the tea down, so I can drink it faster. And then I've got my favorite, Chinese kettle with this lovely little, Japanese teacups in the house of dreams, waking up when I want. And, I cannot imagine a more idyllic drink, there's nothing that I want more than this. I'm sure there is somewhere, but I can't think of it, right? Or I'd be doing it. My brain, the first time I had this tea, the first time I had these peaches, was just exploding. I knew it was 30% better than this tea over here, and it was 40% better than this, and it was organic, and it looked the right. And then I tried the different teacups, and it was all so perfect. Now this morning, right before making this video, and the prompt for making this video, and I've got my glass electric kettle. Meaning all I have to do, with my reverse osmosis, dechlorinated water and all that, into my glass kettle so that no plastics permeate into the water, etc. And I just press a button, the water boils, and it turns itself off. It doesn't get any better than that. Now I take my glass kettle and I pour it into the ceramic of this jasmine teapot. The smell is delicious. I've counted the exact number of pearls. I like 10 pearls in this kettle. And it doesn't get any better than this. But my mind is not on the tea. My mind has long ago taken this for granted. My mind is, how are the allergies going to be out in, when doing the design? My shoulder's a little sore because of this. My dog got a little feces caught in his hair. He's a very furry Pomeranian. And every so often, a little bit of feces gets caught in his hair. Then so my mind is not on the positive. It's not on the exquisite. It's on the fact that I have as many problems as I ever did. They're just different problems. They're different problems. And so the more successful one creates one life, the brain will still always go to those little areas. Now, Sonia Lyubomirsky in her work will suggest doing things like adding in awareness of gratitude. And so I have a gratitude thing. Now, what was the joy? What was the highlight? It was the new thing. You see, my wife, this is our 44th monthsary, meaning every month we celebrate the day of the month that we met, right? And my wife introduced me to this idea, and I loved it. Why? Because it was a new idea. I dated other women. They didn't talk about monthsaries. She did. And I thought, what a great new idea. So I enjoyed it because it was new. And I'd forgotten this was our monthsary, the 9th of every month. I'd forgotten. I wasn't paying attention that it was the 9th, and I wasn't paying attention that, So I go upstairs, and there's a beautiful handmade card by my wife sitting on the couch. And I open it up, and there's all this love and beauty in this card. And so this was new. This was new, and this cannot be bought by money. Anyone can do this. This brought me more pleasure, more well-being than perhaps anything all day. And I was so touched and so excited about it. I immediately called her and I said, what should we do for our monthsary? What would you like? What would make you happy? And she said, well, why don't we have a dinner delivered and have it out on the deck and watch our movie on an iPad by the fireplace. Let's do that for our monthsary. And I said, yes. Would you like to order? Shall I? She'll order. I'll cook an Indian curry. And so this is the highlight, because it's new. Now, I was doing new things like this when I was 17, when I didn't have a penny, and so these new things capture attention, while the old things, however luxurious, fade into the background. And so this is why rich people complain, many of whom have sold out their best relationships with lovers and family in order to get rich, only to discover that what they sold out, those little special moments, might have brought far more well-being. Now, there is a flip side to this, because if you're poor and you're uncertain in your survival and your security, you are guaranteed to be very unhappy. As you go from poor, unable to survive and feel secure, to secure survival, that's the threshold, secure survival. When you have certainty in a long, adequate life, I'm going to be healthy, I'm going to get medical care if I need it, I'm going to eat decent, healthy food, and I'm going to live a long life. And I'm going to have people care for me when I die and all that. If you have certainty around that, you will go from being unhappy to quite happy. And then it will fade into the background. But going from happy to very rich at the expense of daily habits and personal relationships is statistically a bad trade-off. So I hope this gives you a little insight.